Every time I come out here, Vinny's doing a job and you're holding his hand.
Me and him split everything. We start.
And everybody else do.
Every bike that needs to get built gets done. Everybody's working at all.
Started yesterday.
Get your hands dirty for a change. Do some welding and grinding instead of watching.
Times, and you know what? 10 years. This is the kind of stuff we've been dealing with for 10.
Paul transformed Orange County choppers into a television conglomerate. In a devastating family conflict, Teutul Jr. lost everything, including his father. Required $1.5 million from his own son, forcing his brother to take sides. However, there was a point in time when you and your father sort of split up. I mean, he fired you at that point. Was extremely difficult, but in retrospect, it was the best thing, because Paul understood the genuine. I've discovered a great deal of understanding and forgiveness as a result of their well-known rivalry. Due to the fact that I have my own son now, the man who constructed the most well-known motorcycles in America, exposing the heartbreaking reality behind the cameras and the reason he hasn't eaten with his father on holidays for 15 years. The majority of children in the mid-1980s were either playing or riding bikes while watching cartoons. Paul Teutul Jr. and Nintendo had somewhat different ideas about what fun was at. Only when other children were at the beach. He was already 12 years old and working in the hot and noisy Orange County Iron Works. Even before that, Paul was cleaning up metal shavings from workplace floors and delivering tools to adult males who were welding steel. He used to go to his father's workplace and gather metal scraps like they were toys that he had placed in miniature sculptures. Creating things out of early exposure to what others considered trash impacted everything. By the time Paul was already welding at the age of 14 with a composed accuracy that even the most experienced men appreciated him because he wasn't merely gaining new skills. He was also learning how to think like a builder. But his father Paul Sr.'s life at the business wasn't all sparkles and glory. Was known for being severe, and he wasn't kind to his son. In fact, he frequently treated him worse than everyone else, and Junior couldn't get away with minor errors. He would be scolded in front of everyone if something went wrong. Felt it was unjust, but Senior felt that as the years went by, their individuality would grow stronger. Clashed more frequently, and I believe that the show caused a great deal of harm, and Paul Sr. enjoyed using old-fashioned ways and sheer power with the family. Paul Jr.'s aesthetic was more artistic, favoring precise details and crisp lines. When Jr. renovated a railing one summer to make it stronger and more attractive, his father initially disapproved of it. However, a few days later, he used the design and gave his approval without a word. Respect existed in the back of everyone's mind, but it came with a continuous. Paul Jr. engaged in a tug-of-war as the majority of high school students studied for math exams. He took a different route and enrolled in a vocational program that allowed him to learn mental work for half of the school day. Learn how to read the stress points in welding drawings, and one of his teachers, Steele, claimed that he had a unique talent that allowed him to see how metal. Spent hours after class wanting to move before even touching it. He knew he didn't need a welder since he practiced every cut and weld until it felt natural. Prestigious degree, he only needed to become an expert in his field. When he got back to after graduating, he stopped sweeping floors in his father's shop. He was an accomplished fabricator who supported it and spoke the language of the experts. By 19th century, Paul Jr. was in charge of the railing section at Orange. That's no minor task, County Iron Works, as the department accounted for over half. The most people would think that the company's revenue was the result of familial favoritism, but in reality, Junior deserved it because his ideas were so well liked, and he provided the store a contemporary edge by increasing their design possibilities. Customers were prepared to wait longer and pay more for his creations, but he also had to oversee workers who were considerably older than him, some of whom had been in the military, and some who were dubious about initially, but eventually, even the hardest ones acknowledged that he was skilled. So, what are you considering? Do you intend to use an Indian motive? He had transformed a metal business into a topic of conversation, and that type of respect is still difficult to obtain. After years of constructing rails and staircases, Junior felt confined and wished there was something more. To construct something that sparked a spark that ignited when he began after hard work days, I covertly doodle motorcycles in an old notebook. Senior inquired casually when his father resumed riding motorcycles. Junior to assist him in building one, but Paul Sr. was taken aback when he saw what his son had created. It wasn't just technically, it was art that day. Senior exclaimed, "Let's build," as he glanced at his son. Motorcycles for real. It wasn't only about bikes as a pastime or a business. Motorcycles, the goal was to address a much larger issue. The years of separation between them with roughly Orange County was formally established with $175,000 scraped together from the family's iron works business. It didn't matter yet that the helicopters weren't equal. The senior kept 80% while the younger received 20%. They only had a dream and a chilly tool-filled basement, yet in a matter of months the bikes they constructed began to garner attention. True Blue took the first one. Unending late-night welding in blue paint for 4 long months with the white flames appeared to have originated from a large builder rather than a frozen garage. When they took it to Daytona in 1999, people in upstate New York were astounded to see that they weren't nobodies. No longer, but success wasn't simple. In 2000, they were constructing motorcycles in a small workshop equipment that was frozen broke suppliers who demanded payment in advance, and funds quickly ran out. Paul Jr. frequently put in 18-hour workdays while dozing off on a shop couch in order to maintain their schedule. They engaged in frequent, intense yelling matches, not for show, but for survival. Each bike they sold hardly made up their expenses, yet they continued to because they couldn't stop but had to. And then in 2002, a phone call. Craig Pelagian, a TV producer, arrived and noticed a magazine article about their bikes. Paul Sr. answered the phone when he was hunting for a new reality program and said, "What the hell do you want?" Sr. knocked down a show that a producer had presented about recovering junkyard bikes. "We build them from scratch right away," he remarked. The producer returned with a stronger concept weeks after the contract nearly fell through. Paul Jr. detested the notion and was afraid of the real procedural disputes in the movie. He even sent his father a 5-page letter stating that cameras would ruin everything. The contract insultingly stated, "They'll make us look like fools." $5,000 per episode with so many camera retakes and harsh lighting that it interfered with their at one point. The show's creators proposed renaming it Family Friction Paul Jr. They almost walked, but they signed when American Chopper came along because they needed the money. Launched on March 31, 2003, and nobody anticipated what would happen next, and it blew up after just 3 episodes, with over 3 million viewers every week. Suddenly, their small business transformed into a stardom, and they were no longer just bike manufacturers. Merchandise that flew off the shelves of a tourist attraction, earning $13 for Discovery Channel. Due to their first season's sales of millions, the Teutals had to move into a colossal $12 million edifice that was formerly Paul Sr.'s. People were drawn in by Paul Jr.'s fury, but he was the one who kept the public watching. They enjoyed watching him construct Jr.'s drawings, regardless of the drama. In actuality, magic is silent, focused, and accurate. His construction of a gas tank without any music or conversation turned into one of the most requested videos ever shown at welding schools in the United States. Enrollments surge, which they dubbed the Pauly effect, followed by the bike that transformed everything. The Black Widow was more than just a bike, it was a declaration. 167 hours of pure spiderweb gas tank custom wheels workmanship, 15,000 people crowded to see it when it was unveiled in New York. Soon after, they started selling model kits clothing, but security had to keep the throng back. In just 6 months, approximately 280,000 model kits for video games and other products were sold, making Osea when Paul Jr. completed creating the Fire Bike in June. The brand was more than simply a store. 2003 was a sea change in his career and wasn't just another helicopter. Was creating a memorial to the firefighters who died on September 11th, not simply a motorcycle. Consequently, each component of the bike had to be able to carry one of the most. A genuine piece of steel from the world's ruins was one of the dramatic features. Trade Center Paul welded that onto himself rather than giving it to someone else. The final component was a diamond plate bracket he designed just for this bike, to which the jagged piece of metal was fastened. The most sentimental, but that wasn't the only difficulty with the design. Ambitious enough to need to modify the bike's frame entirely in order to support, there are 343 hand-painted insignia, one for every fireman who lost their life. Significant engineering was needed for both literal and symbolic purposes, and when the bike got into an accident the next year, and the New York Fire Department responded to it differently than they would have if it had been a typical wreck. It meant a great deal to me to carefully recover the wrecked bike, as if it were a fallen buddy. Currently housed in the Museum of OC, it has attended more than 248 events and continues to draw crowds. Sentimental, and years later, Paul Jr. left tributes and personal comments next to it. Would re-examine the suffering and impact of 9/11 with a second tribute endeavor. When this particular bike was presented on January 20, 2011, the response was overwhelming, bringing together individuals like New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg in addition to bikers. And Daniel R. Tishman had requested Paul, the president of the 9/11 Memorial, a memorial board member, to create something truly remarkable, and he not only 2 bikes, one of which was kept as a memorial and the other was given away at a raffle to generate funds for the memorial. Attendees paid for their tickets both in person and online. Went directly to support the 9/11 Museum on the day the lid was removed. Adult men, families, tourists, and bikers all sobbed as they were struck by without uttering a single word, the design conveyed a story about the emotional weight of what that equipment signified. The message was disseminated by the Huffington Post in a complete piece, reaching many who couldn't attend but were hidden behind the gaudy. His technical expertise was even more amazing when it came to paint and polished chrome. Paul Jr. wasn't only creating attractive motorcycles. In 2012, he subtly unveiled a revolutionary method in the motorbike industry. He started utilizing T-spling, was a tool that simplified the process of creating curved, smooth shapes. Take more than 40 hours, but today it only takes 15, and when he constructed an electric bike was soon after Autodesk made that technique indispensable, other stores adopted it as well. Method frequently without acknowledging its origin or providing credit. Then in 2015, Paul did something that even his team was surprised by. He developed a system that made motorcycle frames stronger yet lighter, which fundamentally altered how they constructed conventions, but he went one step farther and learned how to write G-code on his own. The CNC machine programming language. Before he transitioned from artist to machine operator after creating the bike. Both the technical and creative aspects of the build are handled by a machinist. The relationship between Paul Teutul Sr. and his son didn't start out that way. When Sr. granted Jr. a 20% share in their business in 2007, it was done discreetly but retained complete authority for himself. First, it appeared to be a just arrangement. Father runs the business, son introduces the fashion, but as Jr.'s designs gained popularity and garnered attention, the balance began to shift, and people stopped complimenting Sr.'s old-school craftsmanship any longer. Instead, they discussed Junior's crazy concepts, and the man who started Orange County Choppers from the beginning was not pleased with that. Behind the scenes, jealousy took hold, and every time Junior arrived late or worked in, the senior's hold grew stronger. It lighted a fuse in his own way, and the longer it burned, the more difficult it was to extinguish. By 2008, the store had devolved into a battlefield where father and son conflicts were common. Weren't uncommon, rather, they were commonplace. Junior desired control most of the time. There was a conflict between the freedom to create and the senior's desire for compliance. The cameras are on Americans as they contrast the creative energy with a strict discipline. Chopper managed to capture a portion of it, but they missed the worst part when the lights went off. Senior became more cruel not only with designer Junior. Jason once destroyed his own work after one of everyone in the shop, including Mikey the goofball, walked on eggshells during the senior's tirades. He looked like he had been yelled down for years, and his younger brother, who was in peacekeeping, was unable to escape the emotional damage. Had at last overtaken him, and then the September 2008 explosion. Senior snapped what should have been a warning when Junior was late once more. Into a furious altercation in front of the whole crew. I want to be with my father, but I was able to develop spiritually after leaving that toxic relationship. I kind of came out from under my father, and then I simply became my own person, which affected me emotionally and on many levels. When Junior attempted to defend himself by claiming that he always completed the task, Senior would not listen. Fired back, saying that without him, OC would collapse. Senior blew up. Junior became so irate that he threw a chair across the office before throwing a trash can. Senior followed after him and dismissed him after he kicked down a door and stormed out. The location where the chair was thrown not only damaged furniture but also shattered it. Whatever remained of their collaboration would eventually become a meme, but at the time it was a calamity. Following the firing, the crew was divided, with some supporting Junior. Others remained silent out of fear of Senior's anger, and clients began to worry that even the network panicked. But their motorcycles still have the same enchantment now that the designer is no longer with them. Junior was warned that by leaving the show, he had violated his contract, so he returned briefly as a contractor, but by April, it was over. He was done for good in 2009, but he went one step farther and wanted Junior to leave the business entirely. And when Junior refused to sell, he attempted to purchase his 20% portion. Senior filed a lawsuit. The legal tangle was about more than simply money. Power Senior said he had the right to purchase out, and wanted complete control returned. After selling Junior's shares for $500,000, he filed a lawsuit. He even made his own business a co-defendant in order to obtain an additional $1 million in damages. It was a bizarre attempt to place Orange County helicopters on both sides of the case. Intended to evict Junior entirely, but Junior wasn't giving up the core of one poorly drafted contract provision that stated Senior could purchase Junior's shares at fair market value was the source of the dispute, but didn't specify how to determine if the ambiguous language would become a legal explosive. The initial decision in favor of the lawsuit when it reached the New York Supreme Court in 2010, the senior court ruled that the buyback clause was valid and mandated an external appraiser to determine the shares' worth. When it appeared that Junior was finished, they sat. Junior appealed while they were in court together, hardly even glancing at one another. Everything changed in December when the appellate court overturned the decision, stating that the Junior retained his 20% ownership in OC because the phrase was too ambiguous to execute. And Senior was unable to evict him. This was a significant legal victory and a personal triumph as well. The son who was believed to have been destroyed was still alive, and my relationship with my father is one of the few times we don't argue since he couldn't let him go. That's what I'll say. Are we hanging out? No, we're not, so things aren't terrible. But they might be better. But it's all right, sometimes these things take time. Junior was unable to construct motorcycles immediately. He was prohibited from making motorcycles for a year due to a non-compete agreement. 2010 caused him to change course and begin designing products, such as a dog park, and Coleman claimed that remodeling his camping barbecue was one of the most difficult periods of his life. However, he persisted, and he and his spouse converted a room in their home into an office. Founded Paul Jr. Designs directly across the street and employed a young man for computer work. The street from OC in April 2010, exactly 1 year before Paul Jr.'s non-compete agreement after Orange County Choppers was over, he took a move that nobody anticipated. Rather of just opening his own bike shop, he incited a full-scale rebellion. Vinnie DiMartino and Joe Polifico were among the individuals who had served as the foundation of OC. Even his own brother, Mikey, left the company along with Nub Collard. Cody Connolly soon joined him after following him, so this wasn't simply a Paul Sr. was devastated by the widespread desertion that occurred during the business transition. An enraged Discovery Channel wasted no time in turning the tables. Senior vs. Junior is the new series that Reality TV Gold is introducing, putting father and son in a weekly battle that made it difficult to distinguish between Paul Sr. and Junior's conflict was not new in terms of family and ratings, but every episode of this show, which debuted in August 2010, fueled the fire. But Paul Jr. was hesitant to broadcast their family drama on national. Paul Sr. leaned into the television, which was intended to be the setting for the shop conflicts. Intense, and viewers were urged to choose sides, according to one reviewer. Tantrum TV, and they weren't mistaken when they said that the emotional destruction, this was no longer only amusement. It was actual suffering wrapped in a despite public consumption. People were unable to turn away from this pandemonium. During an episode shot, Paul Jr. unexpectedly encountered Rachel Beast. She appeared as the McCuff girl, dressed in a yellow jumpsuit, and something just what began on a television set became a serious matter when litigation were in the air, and Rachel felt the tug of the Teutul name in all directions. Gave Paul Jr. something substantial. She had her own job, her own shop, and Paul eventually found equilibrium via her, and she became the calm in his storm. Eventually, a stronger feeling of faith would change his entire existence. Their August 2010 wedding was stunning, and ought to have been a new beginning. Magnificent, and even featured a 6-tiered cake designed by TLC's Cake Master, but one of them was vacant. Everyone saw that Paul Sr., who had been invited, did not show up, but the fact that his father wasn't was still too raw for litigation and resentment. He was severely impacted on one